on. I can see people. Oh, there's Rachel popped in the room.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Rachel.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. So we got some early birds in here today, I see.
Yeah.
Good.
I was wondering how the conference was going for everybody. If they had some favorites I should go back and check out. Are these going to be available, recorded, and
they are?
Great.
They are indeed. Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't honestly know. I have unfortunately not been able to go to anything today. We're just slammed in our office today with faculty needs around technology. We're prepping for classes to start on Monday. So yeah, I haven't been able to see anything at all. So I'm just happy to be here and get to chill for a minute with you guys.
Awesome. How about April, Jennifer, Julianne? Did you guys see any presentations earlier today that you really liked or recommend I should go back and look at?
Popped in and out of a few things.
Yeah.
The open educational resources one was interesting, and then of course Lindsay's thing was great this morning, as it always is. So.
Yeah, I'm also on the West Coast, so the keynote speaker I just was not awake for. So
yeah, but we're worth going back to the
confess.
You're not awake 24/7, Jenny?
Right. Most of the time, yes. This morning. Oh yeah, so April had said the presentation on discussion boards. So I think that was Aisha McGriff, and I watched that one too, April. That was a nice overview. And open pedagogy, Julianne was mentioning. Yeah, I know there were a couple where there were two that I wanted to see at the same time. So I'll definitely go back and look at that.
So Jenny, how are you feeling about hosting? You want me to continue to host, or you got everything you got everything you need, or?
I think I have everything I need.
Okay.
Like I mentioned in a comment to you, which you probably didn't see because then I sent it out to everyone because nobody was in the room yet.
Oh, okay.
That I'm going off my laptop, but I did connect my laptop to my desktop, and so I'm kind of having two screens so I can just see things better and things aren't overlapping on my screen so much.
Yeah,
so
that helps.
I'm also not looking at the right camera a lot of times because I have the screens and my notes, and so
no problem.
I may not be looking at you guys like I am now.
Oh, good. All right. Well, if you're good, I'm gonna just go find a little bottle of water. I'll be right back.
Sounds great.
Okay.
So I'm gonna ask, and you don't have to answer. I'm gonna ask April. So you were at the discussion boards this morning. So are you kind of new to teaching online, or have you been teaching online for a while? Are you new to discussion boards, or what's your experience with discussion boards? Or anybody else for that matter. Okay, so you're new to teaching and you took online courses. That's great. It's nice to have that different perspective. I took a online course in library school a long time ago, and it was just one course, and yeah, this was almost 20 years ago. So things are very different now. I don't even remember what the interface looked like. And I don't know that it was a very successful class for me. but I also think that was a lot on me, and not just being familiar with how to interact online, and just being from the other side. I think we do things a lot different now, and perhaps better. So thanks for sharing that. So you were synchronous online. That's really interesting. I love that idea. Where I work, we don't have any synchronous online sessions. We only have asynchronous online sessions. So I'll be pointing that out in my presentation today. Your current program is asynchronous, yeah. So I work with another librarian too that I think she might have gone to the University of Alabama for her MLIS program, and hers was also synchronous online, and she said she really enjoyed it. So it's something she talks about a lot, because we are asynchronous, and now she's working in that she would really like to have some synchronous sessions. I think the session I attended earlier, 8 o'clock my time, I guess that's 11 o'clock East Coast time. I think there were over 20 people in that session, so we're sitting at about 5. So we might be just a little bit smaller session. I'm guessing as the day wears on, people might drop off and have to go to other duties, or maybe it's the end of their working day. So we'll see if we are a small, cozy group, or if we're going to get some more people. I think the session is actually starting at 12:20, and I think I have 12:23. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, I think I'm in business again now.
Perfect. Does our session start at 12:20?
Your time, yes.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
3:20 our time. 3:30.
Okay.
3:30 our time. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, it's 3:30?
I believe so. Let me just
Okay.
double check that.
See, 3:20.
I had 3:30 on mine, but that doesn't necessarily
Oh,
mean
yeah. I think I see between the other sessions there's 15 minutes, but between this last session there's only 5. So I wonder if that was a typo. If it's supposed to start at 3:30, or if they meant to just
I do see
tack it
3:20.
on in 5 minutes.
Okay, well then please accept my apologies. I thought we were going with a 3:30. So if you
Yes.
need to go ahead, please feel free.
Yeah. I don't necessarily need to go ahead. We have 6 people. So what do you think? Should we start? Or
I'm so sorry. When did you guys finish up your last one? It was at 3:15?
It was at 3 o'clock.
It was at 3? Okay, so they may be ready to go.
okay. So I guess I'll go.
Okay,
I'm happy to wait 5 more minutes, or I can go.
it's up to you.
I was going to say, you make the call.
I think we can probably go ahead.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining this afternoon. I know maybe it's been a long day for some of you. So I'm Jennifer Bodley, and just to let you know ahead up front, I'll be asking some questions during our time together, and I really hope you'll feel free to participate by speaking up and sharing your experiences and thoughts. And of course, you're welcome to use the chat forum too. I know April and I were talking and she was using the chat forum. So certainly whatever you're comfortable with, but it will be much more lightning if I don't have a lot of talking with you guys as participants, and that's fine too. It'll just be a little bit shorter. And I just wanted to let you know that my presentation will really be a snapshot of a problem I was having at work, the approach that I found that addressed that problem, and the way I implemented that approach in my practice. So, oh, let me go ahead and share my screen. Sorry. Great. So you should be able to see my slides now. And let me see if I can advance my slides. Sometimes it takes a second to, there we go. So I'm an embedded instruction librarian at City University of Seattle, and I work with a diverse group of students across several programs at the bachelor and master levels. And a large percentage of my instruction is online in asynchronous online discussion boards. And the bulk of my online teaching is for the undergraduate population taking our English composition block. And many of our students are adult learners. But what I'm talking about today actually has applications for all students across all content areas. So I had a big problem. In most of my discussion boards, I was spending a lot of time and energy writing follow-up posts after students had posted to the discussion board, and pointing out what was good or what needed work, giving additional information and asking several questions along the way. And so I was really trying to construct conversation and model good academic habits. And when I went back to check the discussion boards for my responses to my thoughts and questions, I found really brief, low effort responses like, those are great ideas. I'll do just that, and thanks. So some students had no responses at all. And I'd send class announcements asking for students to reply to my posts, but that didn't really fundamentally change what was happening. And over time, being in this situation really had a big impact on me. It was depressing. I'd invested so much and I was really getting so little back from the students. The few good interactions I was having just really weren't enough to sustain me. And so I was just feeling a lot of emotions, futility, confusion, exhaustion, and to be honest, I was a little angry at both the students and the situation. So my question I'm putting out to all of you is, does that resonate with anyone? And I'd love to hear if that resonates with anybody. Again, you can go ahead and note that in chat or jump in. And if it does resonate with anybody, I'd love for somebody to very quickly share, if you're comfortable, an example when you poured your heart out and ended up kind of feeling like it was a waste. And I have a comment from Julianne. Student engagement is the key no matter what the mode of instruction. Absolutely, absolutely. It's hard online though. It is a little harder online, I think. But that's where I teach, so. Well, it's good if it doesn't resonate with you. But when I've talked to a lot of other instructors, I think they, at some point in their teaching career, this has resonated with them, particularly if they're new to online teaching and using discussion boards. So let me go ahead and advance. So I knew I needed to spend less time writing, all while trying to increase engagement. And so I just described my problem, but I wanted to know if there were any other common issues you all see in poor student posts, and if you'd want to share those here, I'd love to hear about the kinds of issues you might see, hallmarks of poor student posts. And again, you can use the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and speak up.
So I'll respond. I'm Christina Moore. Sorry, I don't have my camera on. I'm at a computer that doesn't have a camera right now. But I would say that I've done a lot of work over the years to very carefully structure how students respond in forms and what their jobs are, precisely because I was concerned about this issue. And while overall I'm pretty happy with the result, it does feel like it's always such a big production to get students to authentically choose to engage in the most really interesting type of thinking. It's always just trying to find the lowest common denominator sometimes. And that's not always the case, but it just seems like I have to work so hard to structure the form just right in order to get some substantive feedback. But to Julianne's point, while there's definitely some struggles with online communication, I guess I'm overall optimistic because I hear from a lot more students online than I would ever hear in my face-to-face classrooms. So there's a little bit more equity there. So I try to boost my morale in that way, and that there are some really great opportunities online, even if they don't always work exactly how we expect.
Absolutely. Christina, thanks for sharing. I love the positivity. I can always use positivity. Anybody else want to share anything? Definitely some things that I've seen from students are students using quotations for a large part of their response. So instead of them responding, they're kind of taking somebody else's words and responding. Students not necessarily providing evidence to back up their position or claim. So they're maybe writing opinion, and so they aren't using the evidence and doing some synthesis to provide a supported answer. Very short and vague is an issue sometimes. And another issue is that sometimes I can tell that students didn't seem to do the reading before and read the associated related content before posting for the activity or in the discussion board. But back to my despair and my problem originally, I guess we'll go. So I came across two articles by Sherry Toledo about creating good questions for online discussion. And Toledo specifically discussed the use of Socratic questioning in online discussion boards. And Socratic questioning, if you aren't familiar, is a learner-centered approach that challenges a person to develop critical thinking skills and engage in analytic discussion. And that leads to independent learning and thinking. And this form of questioning can be used to create exploratory conversations that help students uncover assumptions and analyze complex situations and concepts. And Socratic questioning helps students really connect content and the critical thinking process. And I think a lot of students struggle with that. Certainly a lot of the adult learners for me who are coming back to school and taking English composition. So it's their first time kind of back in an academic environment. And they just might not have those skills at the ready. They're used to microblogging on Facebook. And so they're still kind of getting back into that academic mindset. So according to Toledo, a Socratic questioning approach might be done via 5 sets of probing questions that address clarification, assumptions, reasons and evidence, viewpoints or perspective, implications, and consequences. And I also just want to note, as a librarian, and I believe there's another librarian, at least one other librarian here attending, I really believe that Socratic questioning supports students acquiring the knowledge practices and dispositions mentioned in the framework. So I just wanted to put that out there for any of my librarian friends that are attending. So here are the 5 categories of probing Socratic questions and some examples of those types of questions. So under clarification, how would you summarize in your own words the quote you posted? That kind of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier. What are you seeing kind of in low quality posts from students? So this is maybe a way to address that kind of an issue. And in what ways does this relate to our issue? Why do you say that? I wonder how that relates to a second reading. Assumption questions might be, might that always be the case? Why would that assumption be applicable here? Reasons and evidence. Where else might one find supporting evidence? You might ask, it would help to have an example. What might that look like? Viewpoints and perspectives. What are strengths and weaknesses of your perspective? What might be an alternative perspective or viewpoint? And then implications and consequences. To answer this question, what other questions might we answer first? Or how would X affect Y? Or why is it important that we spend time and learn about this issue in the first place? So I want to note that sometimes this type of questioning may seem curt and confrontational to students. So I'm reading kind of softened versions. You'll see softened in my title. And softened versions of kind of Socratic questions might use the word you less, seeming a little less confrontational, and might use words or phrases like, I'm wondering, or considering, or if that happened, if this. So I really want students to feel safe sharing their thoughts and not be afraid to explore. And so these are really short, pointed questions that really ask the student to go deeper in their thought processes. So what does this look like in my practice? Well, we'll get to that in a second, but I did start implementing it. And I kept my responses short, and I made every keystroke count. I made sure that there was a lot of white space in my reply. I know students' bandwidth might not have the, they might not have the bandwidth to read something long, so I really like to keep it short and have a lot of white space. And after I started implementing it, I saw some changes in the student responses, and it was really positive. Student engagement seemed to increase, and I spent a lot less time crafting longer responses. And one of the best things I think I saw was that I even saw some students picking up on this questioning style, and I saw them mirror asking these types of questions to their peers when they were replying to their peer posts. So that was really awesome to see. So what I do when I implement Socratic questioning is I always include 3 things. I address the student by name. I show uptake, which is the echoing of what the student has already posted. And I choose one thing that might relate to the probing question I'm going to ask. So some tips I just want to mention before we look at some examples of how I do this in a class. Tip number 1 is to assume the best, don't assume the worst. A lot of my students don't necessarily know how to post and need practice or coaching using discussion boards. I know some instructors that need practice and coaching too. I did when I started. So it's difficult for me, it's difficult for a lot of people. So I think we should expect that it's difficult for our students and that they aren't gonna just get into the class right away and start using the discussion board in the best way. I want you to know that implementing Socratic questioning takes practice, so you kind of have to shift how you're thinking about responding to your students. And I've been teaching and using a discussion board for probably over 7 years, and I've been able to craft some scripts on some of the activities and discussion board posts that I've used, and this really helps with time and scalability. Sometimes I'm in a class of 6, sometimes I'm in a class of 30, and over the week I might have 4 different classes where I'm teaching, or even more, well over 100 students in a week. So this really helps with time and scalability. I wanted to show you a couple examples in my discussion board. Example 1 is up on the screen right now. And this is actually from a, actually I got this from my coworker. This is from a, let's see, it's from a marketing class, I think. And so the student posted to a discussion board where the librarian was facilitating the discussion about finding sources to support an assignment. The student wrote, I used Business Complete and found the SWOT for Toyota, but cannot find any other useful information anywhere else. I also searched the official website. Other websites I searched, such as the Wall Street Journal, requires a subscription. Could you please recommend some resources for searching for Toyota's target customers, Toyota's positioning strategies, price strategies, product strategies, and process strategy? So the librarian response can kind of be quite simple, and it includes the 3 things I mentioned: the name, the echoing, and the question. So for the student, I would write, hi student, thank you for your post. I'm glad you found the Toyota SWOT. That's a good start. It's my uptake. Using the SWOT, the company website and other resources will be about reading and inferring. And so that's where I'm starting to let them know to try to connect the content and critical thinking piece. So I said, I see on the SWOT you included that a threat is increased environmental regulations. And here's my Socratic question. How might an increase in environmental regulations affect Toyota's product strategies? So that's one thing the student was looking at. And I was trying to get the student to see that some of the questions they were asking could potentially be answered with some of the information they already had. What I like to do in my response also is bold my Socratic question. And I think that gives them the cue that they should, that's kind of the important thing that they should be looking at and replying to. So I know it's kind of difficult. I'm going to go ahead to look at this slide again with the examples for Socratic questions, but I was wondering if anybody would want to share a Socratic question that might be used in this instance that's a little different than I used. I can toggle back. So the question I used kind of would fall under probing for reasons and evidence. Was somebody talking? Okay, no. So I might suggest searching, other ways I could reply to this student is I might suggest searching in an industry report. I have the question, I'm wondering how the automobile industry as a whole might shed light on how Toyota is positioning itself. What kind of evidence can you find from an automobile industry report? So that might be an alternate question that I might ask the student. But I'm not spending the time writing a large response that talks about the student's whole answer. Okay, discussion board 2. This is an example that I used for a activity I was doing on a source evaluation. And a student post said, a better article I found was neonicotinoids and bee die-off from Global Research and Mercola.com. The source was unbiased and had convincing evidence. So I know that Mercola is a top Google search result and a usual suspect in this class, known for publishing That includes pseudoscience and unsubstantiated claims. So I know that. And I have a script kind of prepared for this because I know sometimes students will let me post about this particular website. So I wrote back, "Dear student, thank you for your post. I understand you were trying to fact check by using an article written by Joseph Mercola from Mercola.com website. Here's my Socratic question that I've bolded. What might be some reasons to doubt that evidence and that source?" And again, I'm going to ask anybody if they have some ideas on other kinds of questions I might ask that student, or what you might ask that student. And I will just go on with some examples. I might ask, what do other reputable news outlets and organizations like the USDA or the American Association for the Advancement of Science say about the issue? I might call out that they said that the resource is unbiased, and what facts might the source have omitted? I might ask the student, or what additional information is necessary to come to the same conclusion as the article? Maybe, or what impression would the reader have if different wording had been used in the article? So trying to get at some of the inflammatory wording. And a lot of times, because I'm a librarian and I do a lot of activities that relate to source evaluation, I ask a lot of Socratic questions that are related to clarification and reasons and evidence and assumptions. So those are kinds of the questions that I stick to a lot, but any of them can be used in any situation with any content area. So one thing I think is that the quality and depth of the student responses seems to directly relate to the level of critical thinking skills applied. It's not always the case, but you can see the student post I gave as an example here is 2 sentences. You know, for adult learners in a new class, not really understanding how the discussion boards work, this is not necessarily uncommon for me to see. So this is kind of how I address it. And also in my experience, most discussion boards really work to scaffold instruction. So we're really concerned with incremental change, not necessarily mastery of a larger course outcome. So what I'm trying to do is just to get students from point A to point B. I'm not getting them all the way to point Z. So this kind of an approach has really helped me work with students and get responses from them and try to get them to a higher level of thinking. So far, does anybody currently use Socratic questioning in their teaching or something similar to it? You might be using it and not necessarily just calling it that, or have some things that they see in their student posts where this might be applicable.
I'm sure I do, but I think it's really, I haven't done it as intentionally as you have, like calling it Socratic questioning and thinking about it in these categories. I think that can be helpful.
Great, thanks for that comment. Yeah, and like I said, because I teach information literacy, I kind of do zero in on a couple of those types of probing questions more because they relate to the content that I'm teaching. So I hope these questions do help you in your teaching. I want to let you know that this takes practice. I mentioned earlier that it's not easy to do just right away, especially if you haven't been kind of asking questions this way. And so it takes practice. And I've been teaching and using asynchronous online discussion boards for quite a while and have been able to craft some scripts. The Mercola example is something, like I said, I see quite often. So it really helps, again, with time and scalability. And I want to let you know also that this approach doesn't necessarily just need to be used in asynchronous online discussion boards. This can be used in face-to-face situations. You might use it in classroom discussion, but you might quickly at the end think of a Socratic question that maybe in response to something that came up in the class earlier and use that as an exit ticket. You might go ahead and if the students are replying to a discussion board, you have a lot of students in your course, instead of replying individually or to just certain, start a new post and say, a theme I saw from your posts was X. This leads to the question, here's my Socratic question, and then keep the discussion going that way. So there's other ways to use it than just the way I'm using it, and certainly other teaching modes, face-to-face, mixed mode, those sorts of things where you can, and synchronous sessions too, where you can use Socratic questioning. And I think one of the last things I want to just mention today is that encourage you to have compassion for yourself. I don't think burnout or issues that you have teaching get that kind of are tough get talked enough about. So I just want you to have compassion for yourself, and I had to remember to have compassion for myself too when I was in this situation. So I just wanted to leave that with you because I think people don't talk about that enough, that what we do is very difficult, teaching online sometimes, and to just have compassion for yourself. I also wanted to leave you with just the references for the Toledo articles. There are certainly other places where you can find information about using Socratic questioning in discussion boards. I think the Toledo articles are a great place to start if you aren't familiar with this. And I think you could read these articles and start kind of implementing it in your practice right away. And if you want to learn more, talk to your local librarian and ask them to help you source articles if you'd like, or to find other reputable sources for learning about how to use Socratic questioning in your practice. Are there any questions? I'm going to read the chat now. So I did see a commenter, Needham. If I'm saying your name correctly or incorrectly, I'm sorry. You said, yes, you mostly use why and how as probing questions. Right. So it sounds like you're using these kind of more open-ended questions, the why and the how questions.
Thank you, Jenny. Is there more? Or?
So if there aren't any more questions, thanks so much for joining. Rachel, do you have anything to add?
I don't at the moment. Thank you so much for a great presentation. I love the methodical nature of what you're offering us. Another strategy for discussion forums, which can be really tricky, is a great thing to have in the tool bag. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I actually do see a question from Julianne. It says, I may have missed it, but how do you establish the expectations and purposes of online discussions at the beginning of a course? Many of the students I work with are new to online learning. So that's a great question, and that's been my experience. So one thing that's a little different for me is that I'm an embedded librarian, so I go into an instructor's course and I host a discussion board in week 2 and weeks 7 and 8, for example. So expectations for discussion boards are sent out by the instructor and myself. I might sometimes post a thread and say, please everybody read before posting, where I do go ahead and set my expectations. I also let them know that I'm going to be asking them questions just to make sure they don't feel assaulted by my questioning style, especially if it's different from something that they've been doing with their instructor. At City University of Seattle, we have a pretty centralized curriculum. And so a lot of students that take our course and take other courses, we try to give them a similar experience. So As far as the expectations of online discussion, hopefully they're getting that from a lot of instructors, and they're getting the same message about what's a quality post, how do I use the discussion board. But I think those things are still really hard to learn. I think you can tell a student what a quality post is and maybe even show them what one looks like. But if they really are new to the academic world or have been out of it for a while or just aren't used to finding the balance between, formal papers and informal microblogging, and figuring out how best to use a discussion board, I think it's just really difficult for them to do. Another question Julian added on to that is, also, do composition instructors teach modes of online writing as part of the comp curriculum? So I'm not sure I understand that question. And what I don't understand about it is when you say teach modes of online writing, I think that's what I'm not clear on. Could you elaborate? Okay, so you asked if our instructors teach different modes of writing besides essays. Not really. The instructors at my institution don't. I think a lot of the kinds of papers the students will be writing across their content programs are similar, and so I think in our English courses they really try to get them up to speed and make sure they're competent at writing those kinds of papers. So no, they don't have a larger scope than that in their teaching of writing for students with these different levels of formality or these different situations. So we cover like position papers, self-reflection papers, and then other types of research papers. Sure, thank you. Well, have a lovely weekend, everybody. Oh, I guess it's not a weekend yet. Wait, it's just Tuesday. I work part-time, so
I wish it were.
working from home today, and I'm a little thrown by my setting difference here.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Good
Sure.
job. Appreciate it.
Sure.
And thank you to everybody in here for coming to the conference. We hope you guys had a productive day, something to take away with you that's useful, or several things to take away with you that's useful. Yeah. So we good to go, Jenny?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and end it. Thank you. It was really nice to meet you.